The boarding gate was closing when the little girl realized she had been left behind. She stood completely still beneath the harsh white airport lights, clutching a faded canvas backpack against her chest while hundreds of travelers rushed past her. Her eyes kept searching the crowd, desperately looking for the woman who had promised she would never leave her alone. But the crowd swallowed every familiar face. Then the final boarding announcement echoed through the terminal, and the girl finally understood the terrifying truth: she was alone. Her name was Lily, she was 11 years old, and she had less than $20 in her pocket. She had been traveling across the country to meet the aunt she had not seen in years, carrying a small envelope of documents and a photograph of her late mother. Her mother had died several months earlier after a long illness, leaving Lily with relatives who had promised to help her. But promises had become excuses, and excuses had eventually become abandonment. The woman who was supposed to accompany her to the gate had disappeared after taking Lily's luggage, her ticket, and nearly all her money. Lily had been waiting for more than an hour, believing she would return. She didn't. When an airport employee finally approached her, Lily tried to explain what had happened, but fear tightened her throat. She could barely get the words out. She only shook her head, held up the little photograph of her mother, and whispered that she needed to get to another city. Unfortunately, the flight was nearly full, and the remaining seats were far beyond anything she could afford. Lily lowered her eyes and stepped away from the counter. She was trying very hard not to cry. And then, from several yards away, a man noticed her. He was one of those people who seemed to move through the world surrounded by invisible walls. Tall, impeccably dressed, carrying himself with quiet confidence, he had just arrived at the gate with his 8-year-old son. His name was Daniel Carter, a billionaire businessman who owned a rapidly expanding technology company. Newspapers often photographed him at conferences and charity events, but those pictures never showed the exhausted father who woke his son for school, packed lunches when his nanny was unavailable, and still kept the tiny paper airplane his late wife had folded for their child. Daniel had been widowed for 3 years. His son Noah was the most important person in his life. And Noah was the first one to notice Lily. Noah tugged on his father's sleeve and pointed toward the girl standing alone beside the gate. Daniel looked over. At first, he saw only a child with an old backpack and frightened eyes. Then he noticed the boarding pass crumpled in her hand and the tears she was trying desperately to hide. Something about that sight stopped him. Daniel had spent years learning to recognize financial problems, business risks, and corporate disasters before they became serious. But what he saw in Lily's face was something no business model could measure. She was scared. Noah quietly asked his father why nobody was helping her. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He watched Lily approach the ticket counter again. The airline employee explained that the affordable seats were gone, and that the only remaining option was a first-class seat. Lily looked at the price and slowly stepped backward. She shook her head. She couldn't afford it. Daniel looked at his son, then back at Lily. And in that moment, he made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. Before we continue, if you believe kindness can give someone a second chance when the world has turned its back on them, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely different life. Daniel walked toward the counter. He didn't make a scene. He didn't announce who he was. He simply asked the employee about the girl's situation and learned that her reservation existed but that she had missed the boarding process because her traveling companion had failed to return. Daniel purchased the remaining first-class seat. But he didn't stop there. He also arranged for an airline representative to confirm Lily's identity, contact the relative she was traveling to, and make sure she would not be left alone during the journey. When Lily realized what he had done, she stared at him in disbelief. She kept asking why he would spend so much money on someone he didn't know. Daniel simply told her that his son had reminded him of something important. Noah looked at Lily and smiled. He had once been frightened of airports too. Daniel and Noah were seated in first class, but Lily spent the first part of the flight sitting stiffly in her seat, afraid to touch anything. She had never seen a cabin like that before. She carefully placed her backpack beneath her feet, and kept checking to make sure nobody would suddenly tell her she didn't belong there. Daniel noticed. He understood that money could buy a seat, but it couldn't immediately buy a feeling of safety. So he didn't treat her like a charity case. He treated her like a person. He asked about the photograph she carried. Lily finally showed it to him. It was a picture of her mother standing beside a small lake, smiling at the camera. Lily explained that her mother had always told her that people were not defined by what they owned, but by what they did when nobody was watching. Daniel stared at the photograph for several seconds. Those words hit him harder than he expected. His own wife had believed something similar. After she died, Daniel had buried himself in work because grief was easier to manage when it had numbers attached to it. His company grew. His fortune multiplied. His name appeared in magazines. But his son still missed his mother. And Daniel quietly wondered whether he had spent so much time building a future that he had forgotten to live in the present. During the flight, Noah and Lily slowly became friends. They discovered they both liked drawing. Noah took out a small sketchbook and began drawing an airplane. Lily added clouds around it. Soon the two children were quietly laughing together, completely unaware that their simple friendship was slowly breaking through years of loneliness in Daniel's heart. But when the plane landed, the story took an unexpected turn. The relative who was supposed to collect Lily did not answer the phone. Daniel waited. The airline representative waited. Lily waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still nothing. Daniel began making calls. The address Lily had been given was incomplete. The phone number belonged to someone who claimed not to know her. The emergency contact listed in the reservation had apparently been disconnected. Lily sat on a bench with her backpack in her lap. She looked smaller than before. She asked Daniel whether she would have to go back. He promised that nobody was going to abandon her again. But he didn't know yet how difficult that promise would become. The airport authorities contacted the appropriate services, and Daniel discovered that Lily's situation was more complicated than he had imagined. Her mother had left behind limited paperwork, and several adults had been involved in arrangements for Lily's care. Some had taken responsibility, and then disappeared when the responsibility became inconvenient. Lily wasn't simply a stranded traveler. She was a child who had fallen through the cracks. Daniel could have handed the matter over to someone else. He could have written a check and walked away. Instead, he stayed. That night, while Lily slept in a supervised guest room arranged through the airport's family assistance program, Daniel sat alone in the waiting area with Noah asleep against his shoulder. He looked at his son's peaceful face, and remembered the day his wife had died. He remembered promising her that Noah would never feel alone. And suddenly he realized that promises weren't proven by words. They were proven by what you did when keeping them became difficult. The following weeks became a maze of paperwork, legal meetings, background checks, and unanswered questions. Daniel learned that Lily had been surviving on almost nothing. Her mother had worked several jobs to keep her daughter in school. She had saved small amounts of money whenever she could. She had even written letters for Lily to read when she was older. One of those letters contained a request. Lily's mother had asked whoever cared for her daughter to make sure Lily never believed that being poor meant being less valuable. Daniel read that letter and couldn't hold back his tears. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to grieve. Not only for Lily's mother, but for his own wife, for Noah's lost childhood moments, and for all the people he had assumed money could never truly help. Daniel eventually became involved in the process of securing a safe long-term home for Lily. He didn't rush to become her father. He knew she had already lost too many people. Instead, he became the adult who kept showing up. He attended school meetings. He helped her replace the worn backpack she refused to throw away. He took Noah and Lily to the park. He listened when Lily wanted to talk about her mother. And he stayed quiet when she didn't. Slowly, Lily began to smile again. Noah began calling her his best friend. And Daniel began discovering that his enormous house had never felt like a home until 2 children started filling it with laughter. Months later, Daniel was invited to speak at a major charity event about helping vulnerable children. The organizers expected a speech about philanthropy. Instead, Daniel told the audience about an 11-year-old girl standing alone at an airport gate. He explained that he had spent most of his adult life believing that helping people meant writing checks. But Lily had taught him something different. Sometimes people don't need your money first. They need someone to notice that they're hurting. They need someone to stay. They need someone to say, without making them feel ashamed, that they matter. The audience was silent. Daniel looked toward Lily, who was sitting beside Noah in the front row. She was wearing a simple blue dress and holding the same photograph of her mother. Then Daniel said something that made Lily cry. He said that the most expensive ticket he had ever purchased wasn't the first-class seat at the airport. It was the decision to stop walking past someone else's pain. The audience stood and applauded. But Daniel didn't look at them. He looked at Lily. And she smiled. A year after that airport night, Lily's life had changed completely. She was back in school. She had friends. She had a room filled with books and drawings. She still kept her old backpack because it reminded her of the girl she had been when she thought nobody would come for her. But now she knew someone would. One evening, Daniel found Lily sitting beside Noah at the dining table. They were drawing another airplane. This time, Lily drew 3 people sitting inside it. Daniel asked who they were. Lily smiled and said they were a family traveling somewhere new. Daniel didn't correct her. He didn't need to. Because somewhere between an airport gate, a first-class ticket, and a frightened little girl holding a photograph of her mother, something unexpected had happened. A billionaire had given a poor child a seat on an airplane. But the truth was, Lily had given him something far more valuable in return. She had reminded him that wealth means very little if you have nobody to share your heart with. And sometimes, the person you think you're rescuing is actually the person who saves you. If this story touched your heart, please don't just watch and move on. Like the video, share it with someone who believes kindness still matters, and subscribe to Kindness Speaks so more stories about compassion, courage, and second chances can reach people who need them. And before we end, I have one special request for you. Comment. Kindness changes lives. Below if you believe one small act of kindness can change someone's entire future. Your comment may remind someone else that there are still good people in this world. Because Lily's story began with an empty airport gate and a little girl who believed she had been forgotten. But it ended with something far more powerful. She discovered that sometimes life closes one door only because someone kind is waiting to open another. And sometimes, the greatest first-class journey isn't the one that takes you somewhere new. It's the one that takes you from loneliness